In this video, we're going to talk about how to handle exception uh, and how to create your own custom exception class. Say, for example, uh, in order to first of all demonstrate this entire custom exception handling, I created a console application by the name custom exception handling. And in this application, I'm just going to add a new class, say, for example, application. Now, this could be any kind of application. Maybe it's a driver's license application. Maybe it's an uh, mm, your insurance application, etc., etc. Say, for example, let me say this is your driver license application. So, license application class, and I just renamed it. And in this application class, there are two data members: string name and say integer age, which will be calculated based on your read-only uh, integer uh, birth year. So you must pass it to a constructor when creating the object. So I'm going to create the default constructor first, right? Set UR, and there it goes. And there is a parameterized constructor that I'm going to create with this way. That I have this default parameterless constructor. Now let's say I'm going to create a parameterized constructor. So I'm writing this constructor once again with my parameter string name and your integer birth year, and then over there we're going to calculate the age also. So that's not a problem. So when you pass this dot name is equal to name and say this dot birth year is birth year, and based on that, just checking if the birth year is not equal 0, as well as this dot birth year is greater than equal the current year for which you can take date time dot now dot year. Okay, in that case, we are going to set this dot age is equal to date time dot now dot year dot subtract. Also, you can say, or just minus here, no need to subtract, and minus this dot bar here, right? So this is how we're calculating the age as say, correct? Now, let's say we have a situation here where you are setting the age at the birth year, etc. at that point of time, and I want to check whether if the age is less than, so say 18, you are not given a license for driving the vehicle. So maybe it's a two-wheeler, four-wheeler, it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to keep a property here that's public string property, which has got set. So this dot name is equal to value, and then get this dot name, and as well as public integer age. This is another property which you can also set, but then it's a private set accessor. And in this private set accessor, we are going to set this dot age is equal to none other than this, whatever it is, this dot age is equal to value. So I'm going to write this and say get this age now, and then that's all. Let it be this much only. Now the fact is, instead of using this dot age data member, I'm calling the property here because I have certain logic to write. So I'm going to take this arrow operator out. I'm going to write my logic. So for example, if the value is less than equal 18, I would like to throw an exception here. Else, I'm going to set the value to this dot age is equal to value. That's all. Right? If the calculated age, the value that you are going to set over there, so this subtraction value, if it's less than equal to 18 or less than 18, that's sufficient. Then you are not going to get a license, rather than we're going to throw an exception, and then you can flow easily through the exception. It's not you the exception class object create, but that's a system exception, isn't it? Now the fact is, I do not want to throw an exception in this way. Rather, what I want to do is that I want to create my own exception class and then throw it myself. In the meantime, from program.cs, what you are going to do is that you are going to create an object of license application here, and say new license application. Say it is about Anil's license application. So I'm going to give the name Anil license application object, and there you are passing these values such as the name, and that is going to be Anil, and then its bar theory is still less than 18. So if its current year is 2020, so I'm going to make it 2005, and let's see whether we get any exception or not. And you will see that there is no exception over there, as because what will happen, in this case, first of all, let me create as an null and then say here license application like this. Okay, so I just split it into two lines. When you write this, the fact is there is no way it's going to throw an exception until unless you do the job, because here the fact is value less than 18 is an application specific logic. Because of that, your runtime doesn't throw an exception. So in that case, you have an option that, as I told you earlier, you can create an exception and or some other child exception class, such as say argument exception. So your argument is something like that, though it's not as such related to argument. Right now, whatever Bharti you have sent is not proper. So right now, uh, you can say age is less than 18 and issue license to, and I can complete it over there with that name. I can call this, right? So this is kind of an exception I'm going to throw. So this particular line is one exception thrown. So I'm going to put it around bracket, and let me show you a quick technique of doing this. You can select this line and right click and say snippet surround with, means Control K and Control S you can press, and then you can surround it with by try. You can select only try because I don't need finally block. Immediately it will be surrounded by it, and if right exception ex, and you can throw not necessary, it's the main function. So I'm going to print it like this way: console.writeline ex dot to string. Okay, like this. So right now, let's see, since it's a specific type of exception and argument exception, you can catch it. If there is any other chance of exception, any other exception, then you can have a multiple catch block where the top level base class should uh, be there in a catch block, which is the last one. So argument exception, practically a class which inherits from the exception class. So better to say exception has a child class known as system exception, which has a child class by the name argument exception. This is how it is. So this is in a multi-level inheritance. Whatever this, wherever this child class comes in that multi-level inheritance doesn't matter. This is the top level base class exception. So you can catch that exception also. Now the fact is, this is what I didn't want. This is not exactly argument related exception. System doesn't take any responsibility of this kind of exception thing. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my own exception class, and in order to do that, take a class first of all and say age less than 18, and most probably I'm not going to take the number 18 exception. Generally, exception class it should be should have a prefix by the name exception only. So this way we can understand this is an exception class. And in order to create a custom exception class like this, you can inherit from a base class application exception. Now, since there are many exception classes, you might think why I have chosen application exception. Let me tell you. Exception is the top level base class, but from there are two child classes: system exception and application exception. What happens over there is in .NET base class library, all exception classes do inherit, all which are related to system. Means runtime takes the responsibility of figuring out the error and throwing the exception comes from system exception class. Whereas this branch has been created from which no inbuilt library exception class to inherit from. It's practically has been kept so that you guys can inherit and create your own custom exception class for the application. That means it's in order to create application specific custom exception class, we use this class, right? So now you can inherit and then use it from your application, like license application from here. So instead of saying argument exception, I can say age less than 18 exception. I do not have any constructor which takes this kind of value. So I'm going to put a constructor over the this is my constructor, and this is going to be my parameterized constructor. And this parameter you can say you pass me and tell me message. And in that case, we are going to pass this error message here, which for which we can keep here and data member like message that can be assigned here too. Say this dot error message is equal to error message error message, right? That's what it is. Now, when you have this error message, fantastic, but then you can pass this error message. Now, as you know that I would like to display that error message, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use the message property here in order to display the message. But the fact is, if I run this application, you can have a look at it. What is going to happen is it's not displaying. Sorry, I just wrote it here. I should also write it here, and also my catchback should be changed to age less than 18 exceptions because I'm not doing any custom exception like that. So let me see what has happened here. Age less than 18 exception. This is my license application. And if value is less than 18, so what is happening here? This dot age date time dot now dot here is 2020, and my birth year that I have passed over there on program is 2005. So let me just debug this code, find out whether I made any silly mistake or not. So there it goes. You create an object of it, goes there, is dot name birth year, and it is okay, not equal 0. And if the birth year, I have a wrong logic. If the birth year is less than should be, I have written greater than. Now let me run this application and figure out what is. Yes, but I'm getting the error with a message error in the application. What is this? It's a default error message for any class that is given when you use the message property. But this is not the error message I was expecting. That's because of the error passed age less than this. See, what is happening is that message is a property which comes from the base class exception. And this message property is supposed to return some kind of message. And the fact is, when you have some kind of message stored over there, you have to have a way to return this error message. So in order to do that, what I can do, technique number one, is that I can override the base exception classes message, which is inherited in the application and came to you also via this message property, and which has this only get access set. That means it cannot be used to set the error message but return the error message. So what I can do is that I can just return this dot error message from here. So now when you use it in your application, practically you are calling the overridden message property. Now when you run this application, you can see easily age is less than 18, can't issue any license to Anil, right? This is the error message you are getting over there. So this is how you create your custom exception class. But then there is another technique, and you might want to prefer it maybe. Let me see. Suppose I comment this and I comment this too. As you know, if you look at the application exception class, and I do not have this line, so I have to comment that too. Look at this application exception class. This inherits from exception class, which has an overloaded constructor which takes the error message, and exception also does similarly has an overloaded constructor which takes an error message. The fact is, what happens from here, whatever message you pass to this constructor, if you pass using let keyword, which by calling the base classes overloaded constructor, which takes one of four out of that. If I have seen that I pass a string value, so if I pass this error message, that will be passed to application exception, which will be passing it to exception class itself. That code will not be shown here. And this error message comes back via the message property actually to you. So you can take this technique. It's a very easy technique that you don't provide any mechanism here to handle how to return this error message. Rather than you pass it to the base class constructor, this base class constructor will pass it to the top level base class constructor exception. From there, message property will get it. As you can see, if you run this application, you can get back your error message also. right? So this is a very nice technique, and this is a very easy to create any kind of custom exception class. One thing you have to do, number one, inherit from base class application exception. Then second, provide constructors, at least one of them which takes error message, and then bypass this error message to the base class, which will bypass it to the top level base class exception, which will come back to you via this message property. And then you can enable it in your application. Second technique to create a custom exception class is do not use this mechanism. Rather, you have a variable here, a data member here, to whom you can assign and override the message property to return this. This is a very easy way to create custom exception class. By the way, as you can notice, there are many other overrideable member like this, source, stack trace, etc., etc. All these things you can override. I'm just showing you the simplest form how to create a custom exception class, and I think that should suffice for your curiosity how it can be created and how it can be thrown. Understand one thing, this kind of exception are not known by runtime. So you are the one who will take the responsibility that depending on certain logic, you would like to throw an exception. And also, you know about this exception, so you can catch that exception specifically. If there is any other, obviously, this fallback catch block. And then you can display this error message, or you can display completely that ex to string. You can call this method, and if you run it, you can see custom exception age is this, error message is coming up, the enter stack trace is coming up, etc., etc., isn't it? So this is how you create a custom exception class, and very easy to create. As I told you, remember the two techniques that you can use in your application. So understand this is application specific exception class. What is there to mention anymore is that try to inherit from application exception class. There are many options, like you can inherit from exception directly, you can inherit from a particular exception class like argument exception, format exception, etc. But since it's going to be your application specific exception class, better to inherit from application exception, because otherwise if you go for a specific exception class like format exception, there will be lots of extra properties which you most probably don't require, and end up having a class with so many inherited members which is not required at the end of the day. So what you can do, simply inherit from application exception, and that's why Microsoft people have created for C# two different classes. One is the system exception, from which all system or inbuilt exception that is thrown by runtime are inherited, and application exception for you to create any application exception specific class. So that's all in this video. You came to know how to create a custom exception class, how to throw that kind of exception, how to pass error message, how to catch it, and take an action after catching. Maybe you want to display, you want to log, whatever.